How do you imagine life for a sick child in a forgotten Nigerian village? How do you think families survive illnesses where hospitals are far away, ambulance are fantasies, and then poverty is a daily struggle? Close your eyes for a moment and then picture what it feels like to watch a helpless child die, not for lack of care, but for lack of access to basic healthcare. Let me take you into that world, not with numbers or statistics, but with a story. About 10 years ago, I met a boy whose story changed my life. And for the sake of confidentiality, I will call him Bashir. He was just 7 years old when I met him. It was one of my earliest free medical outreaches. A very hot, sunny day, I remember vividly. The heat was so intense, you can imagine the heat in a northeastern Nigerian state. Despite that heat, many people had gathered, struggling and desperate to be seen and attended to by the medical team on ground. And that was when I saw her. A young woman, looking disheveled, standing a bit away from the crowd because she was carrying a child on her back. I observed from a distance. I noticed she was drenched in sweat and she was standing barefoot, visibly exhausted. I beckoned her to come to my own side of the table where I was consulting. And when she finally made her way through the crowd, the struggling crowd, she lowered the child she was carrying gently to the ground, as if she was holding on to something sacred. And that child was Bashir. He was looking chronically ill. His face was puffy and his eyelids were grossly swollen. His breathing was coming in short, shallow gasps, obviously struggling for air. And his legs and feet were swollen as well. The look on his skin had the dull, waxy appearance typical of a chronic illness he has been having. He had the classic uremic breath. That's a faint, urine-like smell on his breath. His eyes were wide open, but he was looking distant, with tears trickling down his eyes. He was speechless because he couldn't speak. He was tired, and he was exhausted. At that moment, I didn't need a lab to establish that he had an end-stage kidney disease. His mother had told me tearfully that he had been falling ill for months, vomiting, unable to eat or drink. She had also noticed that he had stopped urinating regularly, and then his limbs began to swell. So as a mother, she did what she could. With the little resources she had, she took him to the herbalist within the village and in the neighboring village, but his condition kept deteriorating. He was also taken to different prayer houses. She prayed and prayed and prayed, but he didn't get better. So she was helpless, and then she waited. Why do you think a mother would wait and watch her child die helplessly? The answer is just one. She had no option because she was a laundress. She earned barely enough to feed Bashir and his 3 siblings, and she had lost her husband years ago. So she lived with her 3 children in a single-room apartment, barely surviving. And then came the news, the good news, that doctors were coming, that there would be free drugs for everyone, and then sicknesses would be cured. So she was happy. She was hopeful. At long last, her prayers have been answered, and Bashir's ailment and predicaments will be cured. Sadly, drugs enough were not enough for Bashir. He had a chronic kidney disease. What he needed was a nephrologist. What he needed was dialysis. What he needed most was an access to a tertiary healthcare center, none of which existed in that remote village, not even the neighboring villages, or even the nearest government hospital had those facilities. I was worried because I have seen the extent of the disease, because I have seen the prognosis if nothing is done immediately. So I did the best I could at that moment. I wrote a referral for him, and then I gave the mother. She was watching my expression. She was waiting for me to tell her something. So I reassured her smilingly, and then I gave her money for transportation because I noticed her hesitation. She didn't have money to transport herself. So I urged her to hurry up and make up that 5 hours journey to the city. So she thanked me profusely and left. I wrote my phone number behind the referral form so that she would communicate when needs be. So she left. I watched her for the second time carrying Bashir on her back, this time around with so much hope that she's going to the city, that she's going there to get Bashir cured of his ailment. But when I went home that evening, I didn't sleep. How could I, knowing the extent of that disease and then knowing the possible prognosis? For days that followed, I was miserable. I couldn't function properly at work and at home. My family had been probing what was wrong, but I couldn't get myself to tell them. Then on the third day, I was at work in the consulting room when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I picked the phone and then came the voice. Hello, this is Dr. Hakim from XX Teaching Hospital. Malama Hajara Maman Bashir wants to speak with you. My heart skipped a beat. I urged them to give her the phone eagerly. So when she was given the phone, she hesitated. And then I heard her voice, shaky and broken. And then she said, Dr. Ahmed, thank you for all you did. Thank you for everything. To the glory of God, Bashir's suffering has ended. He died this morning. I stood there frozen for moments before I finally dropped my phone and collapsed on the chair. I sat for what felt like hours, not knowing what to do or where to start from. I managed to take myself home. I was completely devastated. I felt a helplessness that I have never experienced in my life. I couldn't do anything. I felt miserable. And then I felt an anger, channeled first towards myself for not doing much in solving the child. I only wrote a referral, which was the best I could. But I was angry, most importantly, for a system that failed Bashir even before I met him. Gradually, I channeled my anger and transformed it into purpose. After doing that, I rose. That moment of Bashir's death didn't just shake me, it transformed me into another person. It became the catalyst for my life's action. And then in the evening, I looked myself in the mirror and took a vow that the death of Bashir would never go in vain. So that was the time I started the journey that eventually became the Vital Aid Medical Foundation, a non-profit built on one value: that no child, no human should die due to lack of access to healthcare, regardless of how much they had or where they are situated. We started small with 4 of my friends. We went to pharmacies, we got some free medications, hosted few medical outreaches, and then we publicized the medical outreach. We started having volunteers coming in from different parts. So we had more volunteers, we had more community mobilizers, we held mobile clinics, we did outreaches to far and hard to reach communities. We collaborated with like-minded non-governmental organizations. From the rolling hills of the plateau to the expansive savanna of Zamfara, we took healthcare to people who had never seen a doctor in their lives. We served the forgotten, not just with medicine, but with our presence, with compassion, and with dignity. And in doing so, we learned many things. We learned that you don't need a perfect system to work. All you need is purpose. But sometimes, that purpose you are holding onto can break you because the system keeps breaking you. So the purpose is difficult to hold onto. The purpose is difficult to hold onto when you don't have enough equipment to function maximally, when you don't have enough funding, when you don't have enough support from the system, when your colleagues, the healthcare givers, are leaving the country en masse, the Japa syndrome, and when the brain drain is knocking and despair is constantly reminding you that you would fail. But still, I persevere. And I would like to tell you what kept me going. I had 4 points that I keep in my mind always whenever I feel like giving up. And I summarize them as the rise points of my life. So the R is to remember your why. Let your purpose anchor your action. The I is to ignite your passion. Channel your pain into a meaningful impact. And then the S is to start, and start. Start wherever you are, start with whatever you have, and then start with whichever tools you have at your disposal. Then the E is to empower meaningful collaborations. You can't do it alone. You collaborate to have meaningful impacts. For my healthcare colleagues, who I think most of them are seated here, please, I advise you to rise even if the system is blocking you, even if you think no one is clapping for you, even if you think despair is always knocking, because someone somewhere is waiting for you and I to show up. Someone somewhere is waiting for a miracle, and that miracle is you and I. So therefore, try and channel your pain into passion, because I have seen what happens when ordinary people just show up with good intentions, with hope, and with whichever they have to form an impact. And I believe this, and I would want to share with you before I leave, that you don't need a perfect system. You don't need the change you need to work. What you need is to become a voice that speaks for the voiceless, a light that never goes off. And then you need to be the voice of the voiceless, because someone somewhere is waiting to be seen, is waiting to be served, and is waiting to be appreciated. Thank you, and thank you very much.